Hey there, folks. Buckle up and get ready for one wild ride I had as an Uber driver. Now, let me set the scene for you. It was a typical day cruising the streets, picking up passengers and earning those hard-earned bucks. Little did I know that I was about to encounter the infamous Karen, the queen of all Karens. So there I was, minding my own business, when I received a ride request from Karen. The name alone should have given me a heads up, but hey, I'm an optimistic driver, always ready to take on any passenger. I arrived at the pickup location, and there she was, standing with an entitled air, ready to hop into my car. Karen hopped in and immediately started barking orders at me. "Take this route," she commanded, pointing in a completely different direction. Now, as an experienced driver, I knew that the suggested route was congested with traffic, so I politely informed her about an alternative route that would get us there faster. Little did I know that this seemingly innocent suggestion would unleash the beast within her. Her eyes widened, and her face turned an angry shade of crimson. "How dare you question my directions?" she fumed, her voice piercing my eardrums. "Just do as I say," she demanded, her voice filled with entitlement. Now, I'll admit I have a bit of a rebellious streak in me, so I decided to take that alternative turn against her wishes. As I drove along the alternative route, Karen's anger escalated. She began hurling insults at me, calling me all sorts of names under the sun. I tried my best to maintain my composure, reminding myself that customer satisfaction is key, but oh boy, was she determined to make my life miserable. And then, out of nowhere, I felt a sharp pain in my back. Karen had assaulted me. She had the audacity to reach from the backseat and physically attack me. I couldn't believe it. I quickly pulled over, my heart pounding, unsure of how to handle this situation. But Karen wasn't done yet. She snatched her phone and dialed 911, screaming into the receiver, "I've been assaulted by my Uber driver. Arrest him immediately." My jaw dropped. This woman had just assaulted me, and now she was playing the victim. The audacity! I pleaded with her to reconsider, explaining that I was the one who had been attacked, but she was determined to see me behind bars. Within minutes, the sound of sirens grew louder, and 2 police cars screeched to a halt beside us. The officers swiftly approached, ready to take action. Karen, with a self-satisfied smirk on her face, pointed at me and declared, "That's him. Arrest him." I couldn't believe what was happening. I was the one being falsely accused here. Thankfully, the truth has a way of coming out. As the police listened to both sides of the story, it became apparent that Karen's accusations were baseless. I had witnesses who saw her assault me, and her story had more holes than a slice of Swiss cheese. The officers, seeing through her web of lies, decided to take appropriate action. Karen's smug smile gradually faded as the officers turned their attention to her. They sternly warned her about the consequences of making false accusations and physically assaulting someone. I couldn't help but feel a sense of vindication as she stuttered, trying to conjure up more lies to save herself. In the end, justice prevailed. The officers let me off the hook, and Karen was left to face the consequences of her actions. As I drove away, a mix of emotions flooded over me. I felt relieved, angry, and even a little bit amused at the sheer audacity of this encounter. Being an Uber driver, you encounter all sorts of people, and sometimes you come across a Karen who tries to make your life a living nightmare. It's important to stay calm, level-headed, and most importantly, document incidents like these to protect yourself. Always remember, folks, there are some wild rides out there, but with a little bit of luck and a whole lot of patience, you'll make it through. So, that's the crazy story of my encounter with the notorious Karen. Trust me, folks, this is one ride I won't be forgetting anytime soon. Until next time, keep calm, drive safe, and don't let the Karens get you down. Yesterday, I embarked on a relaxing vacation at a popular beach destination. Eager to beat the midday rush, I arrived at the beach in the morning and meticulously set up my beach essentials: towel, umbrella, chair, and cooler. As I settled down on my towel, ready to soak up the sun and enjoy some music through my headphones, an unexpected interruption abruptly pulled me out of my tranquil state. A middle-aged woman tapped me on the shoulder, and upon opening my eye, I found her accompanied by her family, including young children. They began arranging multiple umbrellas, chairs, and toys about 10 feet behind me. Taking off my headphones, I attentively listened as the woman addressed me with an unusual complaint. According to her, my choice of bathing suit was inappropriate for her children's presence, demanding that I relocate elsewhere on the beach. Refusing to yield to her unreasonable request, I calmly explained that I had arrived first and that they could find another suitable spot if my attire was offensive to them. She countered by arguing that there were no other convenient spots near the water. Determined to stand my ground, I firmly reiterated that I had no intention of moving and promptly resumed listening to my music, placing my headphones back in. An hour later, seeking respite from the heat, I decided to take a refreshing dip in the cool waters of the ocean. As I glanced back at the shoreline from the water, to my utter astonishment, I discovered that the woman and her husband had packed up my belongings and were carrying them away from the area. Swiftly emerging from the water, I immediately sought the assistance of a nearby lifeguard to contact beach security. Meanwhile, I watched the audacious duo as they made their way up the beach with my belongings in tow. With beach security now alerted to the situation, we approached the couple. They feigned innocence, claiming the items belonged to them. However, their facade quickly crumbled when they were asked to provide identification. To their surprise, my identification was discovered in the wallet they had been carrying. Realizing the gravity of their actions, I decided to involve the police and pressed charges against them for theft. As a result, the family was promptly escorted off the beach and justice was served as I reclaimed my rightful spot along the sandy shoreline. The next day, the dreaded inspectors were scheduled to arrive, and my family and I were engaged in a deep cleaning frenzy. I had meticulously planned my day, intending to tackle half of the remaining chores before work and finish the rest later, particularly the mess my daughter had created that I had missed earlier. However, my well-organized plan was disrupted when I abruptly woke up at 6 a.m, a couple of hours earlier than the time I had asked my friend to wake me up for cleaning. Startled and disoriented, I found myself just 3 feet away from my mother, who was screaming at the top of her lungs about trash and cleaning. She had barged into my room, waking both my daughter and me from our peaceful slumber. For a solid 30 minutes, my mother continued her tirade, exclaiming, "The garbage truck will be here in just 30 minutes. Get up and start cleaning." Meanwhile, I surveyed the mess around me. On my bed, there was a jumble of clothes and cords, remnants of my efforts to sort through what I wanted to keep and what I needed to discard. On the floor, there was some debris that required vacuuming alongside a toy horse, a small Santa straw bag my daughter enjoyed playing with, and a box containing snack packaging she had failed to dispose of the previous day. Amidst her yelling, my mother abruptly snatched my daughter away, leaving me disoriented and feeling as if I had lost my hearing due to this sudden outburst. She returned, still fuming, and continued her verbal assault while I struggled to rub the sleep from my eyes, attempting to comprehend the chaos unfolding before me. The exchange escalated as I found my voice and began to yell back in frustration. As a child, I had developed a habit of standing still and waiting for the person berating me to grow silent and lose interest in monitoring my every move. It had become my coping mechanism to momentarily escape my mother's relentless behavior. Eventually, she stormed off, and I mustered the strength to start cleaning, only for her to return once again. That's when she unleashed her most hurtful threat yet. "I'm going to call Child Protective Services and surrender her because you're a pig." Her words struck me with such intensity that I was overcome with hysteria. Though this wasn't the first time she had made such a threat, the manner in which she articulated it caused me to panic. Amidst tears and uncontrollable emotions, I mustered the courage to respond. "Do you realize the extent of the emotional abuse you inflict upon me? Your constant bullying has driven me to the brink of suicidal ideation every time you enter a room. It's effing abusive." I could feel the weight of my words as I confronted her, but I also knew she would deflect and make it about herself. Presently, she stood in the kitchen, casually making waffles as if nothing had happened, acting all chummy with my daughter, oblivious to the fact that she had just hurled a barrage of hurtful insults at me, pushing me to a mental breaking point that left me in tears for hours on end. Now, just to get this out of the way, I know that the issue that spawned this was petty, but the way it was handled was definitely pro. When my father was younger, he moved around a lot. Because of this, he was always the new kids and got picked on almost every time, until he learned he didn't have to take that nonsense anymore. This is one such case of how he would get revenge. Now, at the place my dad lived at the time, he had been there for longer than most places. He lived at that house for a few years. Some places he would only spend a couple months. He had a few friends. He knew his neighbors. They were all buddies. Now, this story starts when one of those neighbors moved away and a new, far worse neighbor took his place. You see, my dad's house was on a hill, but the bottom of the hill went into the neighbor's property. When winter came and it snowed, my father and his friends, including the neighbor's kids, would all go sledding down the hill and have a great time. The neighbor's kids got to go onto my grandparents' property to go down the hill, and my dad got to sled all the way down into theirs. No issues, until the old neighbor and his kids moved out and the new neighbor Kevin moved in. From day one, Kevin was a jerk. He would litter. He kicked the other neighbor's animals. He screamed at a sweet old lady who lived across the street for looking at him funny. Now, my dad didn't think much of it, but when winter came, he would learn how much he truly hated Kevin. When the first snow came, my dad and his friends went sledding down the hill like they always did. They went down a few times, but then Kevin came out. He started screaming about how they were on his property and how they needed to get off right now, or he would call the police on them for trespassing. Now, my dad has always been a pretty reasonable guy, so he understood that while this guy was a great jerk, it was still his land and he could tell them to leave if he wanted to. Now, this meant he and his friends had to go slower down the hill so they could stop before crossing into his property, and that could have been the end of it. But no, Kevin, being Kevin, decided that he could send his kids out and tell them that they were free to go onto my grandfather's property and go down my dad's part of the hill. They were politely met with an "aw heck no" from my dad and his friends. My dad then marched over to Kevin's house and politely explained to him that if he was willing to let my dad and his friends go down the hill, they would let his kids come up his side to sled as well. Kevin then started screaming profanities at my dad about how they needed to let his kids sled, but that they still couldn't sled. After getting chewed out for a solid 30 minutes, my dad and my uncle left, Kevin still screaming at them behind them. The revenge. Psychological warfare. Now, because my dad had known the previous neighbors, he knew the layout of the house pretty well. He knew that the gravel path in Kevin's backyard that led into the wooded areas behind both his and Kevin's home connected to his own gravel path in his own backyard. He also knew that Kevin's family recently had a brand new baby girl. By chatting up the wife, who was much nicer and more reasonable than her husband, he learned a few key things. 1. The new baby was a very light sleeper and was a pain to get to sleep. 2. His wife took care of her during the day, so Kevin exclusively was responsible for taking care of her during the evening. While my dad was clearing his own driveway and path, he offered to Kevin's wife to clear not only her husband's driveway, but his gravel path as well. What he really cared about was clearing the gravel path. Kevin never cleared his in the winter, and my dad needed a way to get to the house without his footprints being seen. Now, all the steps were in place for my dad's master plan. He waited until the dead of night, then, using the gravel path, snuck up to Kevin's home. Fortunately for my dad, the path then circled around the house, so he then walked up the path to where the baby's room was. He picked up handfuls of gravel and started chucking the little pieces one by one at the window. He did this until the baby woke up. When this kid woke up, she screamed like there was no tomorrow. It was so loud. Kevin came rushing in to get the baby back to sleep. He rocked the baby back to sleep while my dad patiently waited. After the baby went back to sleep and my dad knew that Kevin had gone back to bed, he repeated the process. Now keep in mind this was all during winter break, so my dad had slept through the day. He was not tired in the slightest. He brought a book with him. He kept up this process till about 4 a.m. Anytime, Kevin looked like he was getting suspicious, which wasn't often since he was dumb. My dad would just run into the woods and hide till he thought it was safe to come back and try again. He did this for that night and repeated it all week. My dad could see Kevin visibly getting more tired each and every day. However, my dad made a mistake. He got seen by Kevin. The next day, however, it was not my dad who he went after, but my uncle. He attacked him in his sleep-deprived state and ended up being arrested for assault, and while he didn't see jail time, he saw many, many fines and apparently lost his job. He never yelled at my dad for going down the hill again.